I don't even know where to begin with this horrible story. What happened that night just doesn't make sense to me. It's been in my gray head ever since. Yeah, don't be surprised. After what happened, I, a 24-year-old guy, sat around like an old grandfather. This story left a memory on me for the rest of my days. I'll start, perhaps, from the very beginning, from that ill-fated evening when I stood at the station with my canteen and bought a ticket to Ryazan. The station was almost empty. The wind was raging outside the windows and was blowing through my clothes, so I didn't really want to go out. Why am I going to Ryazan? My grandmother lived there, and just a week ago she died. Something with her heart. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, so I didn't know or understand anything. And then I got a call with the sad news. Neighbors, I guess. Well, what can we do? We have to go. They all pitched in and buried her. Neighbors, I mean. I was called in because I'm the only heir, and I was supposed to have an old apartment on the outskirts of town. Well, that's it in a nutshell. I don't see the point in spelling out who I am, what I am, and why. So, having bought a ticket, I went out of the station building into the street, because my train was already standing on the platform, and was waiting for its passengers, which were not very many, maybe 10 people. I've seen people getting into the cars, and most likely half of them were seeing them off. In general, my whole childhood is connected with trains. My mother worked all her life on the railroad as a conductor, and I often went with her on long trips. I loved it. The clatter of the wheels, tea in aluminum cup holders, different sweets that the bosses made the conductors sell. My mother brought me up alone. Where could she leave me alone? She'd go away for 5 days, a week, and there was no one to leave me, so I went with her. And it so happened that my mother worked on the railroad all her life and finished here. I was 17 then. According to eyewitnesses and then the police, there was an accident. My mom was climbing into the car and the train moved sharply. She couldn't hold on and fell. I don't know how she fell, but she was sawed in two. A horrible death. When I get in the car, I always think of my mom. That's what happened that time. I got into the car and wandered along, looking for my seat. 21. Here it is. I had the top shelf. Oh, I forgot to tell you. It took me almost 24 hours to get to the parlor car. The train did not stand for a long time, and literally as soon as I found a seat, it moved. There were very few people in the car. It was almost empty. That's good. At least it would be free to go to the restroom without hitting someone's smelly feet with my head. No snoring all night or drunken chatter. But fuck knows. Maybe there'll be more passengers. But so far everything's quiet. I didn't want to sleep. I drank coffee at the station. I sat down at the table and just stared out the window at the black silhouettes of trees. The clatter of the wheels echoed in my ears and was like music to me. I didn't even want to take out my headphones. But what good would they do? As the train got farther away from Mukosransk, where I live, the internet and mobile communication also got farther away from me. So I could not find a better option than staring out the window. In about 20 minutes, a young female conductor came to me. She brought me bedding and offered me tea. Well, I, of course, did not refuse. While she was making me some tea, I took a cigarette and wobbly wandered to the vestibule. On the way to it, I realized that there were 5 other people in the carriage with me. 2 grannies, 1 young guy, and apparently a husband and wife. Quite dense builds. The guy was already dozing. The grandmother was also staring out the window, and the couple started taking food out of their bags and setting up the clearing. It smelled bad, of course. Yeah, I went out into the vestibule, smoked a cigarette, stood up and noticed one interesting thing. The door to the next car was open. I looked through it and realized that the car is empty. The lights aren't even on. That's weird. What the hell did they put it on for? But I don't know, maybe they'll need it in Ryazan or somewhere else. Or there will be passengers in it, but later. I calmed myself down, finished smoking, opened the car door to throw away the cigarette butt, and a figure, like a man, came into my field of vision. It seemed to run into the darkness from the side of the toilet. Quickly, so sharply, I didn't even realize anything. So I'm standing there, staring out the window of the car, with a pillowcase in my hands. Did I glitch? But no, someone ran by, so what am I? A conductor, maybe. Forget something. But why they're traveling without lights, I don't understand. They're saving money, I guess. Throwing out the cigarette butts, I went back to my seat. They must be saving money in our carriage, too. The lights were so dim that if they were turned off completely, I couldn't see much difference. I drank some tea, warmed up, stared out of the window for a while, and slowly began to fall asleep. The conductor came up to me, woke me up and said, "Don't sleep, young man," and with a kind of, like an insult. Why is that? Well, you can't sleep now. We'll pass one place, and then you can go to bed. And now you can't. Young lady, are you all right? She did look a little worried. Yes, I'm fine. What's the place we have to go through? A bad place. Saying it quietly, she fixed her shirt and walked further down the carriage, probably to warn the others. But I stopped her. Young lady, can I ask you another question? Yes, of course. Tell me, what about the next carriage? They're saving light there, aren't they? Yes? She asked again. Well, yes, it's an empty carriage, and there are no lights. Oh, they're probably asleep. No, there's something wrong with her. Maybe she's overworked. But what I could see, the conductor looked different from when I got on the train. She was worried about something, and she was pretty worried. As I said, she walked further down the carriage, and I watched her closely. After talking to other passengers, she opened the vestibule and went, most likely, to another car. Judging by the laughter, and continued chattering at the end of the car, no one took her words seriously, including me, and for nothing. After sitting for about 10 minutes, probably, and not waiting for the conductor, I began to fall asleep again. What happened next, I will now try to describe. I fell asleep. I woke up. About 3 hours later, I thought. 3.5, or something like that. And there's someone lying next to me, well, next to me, and on top of me. Sleepy, I looked out of the compartment. The car was, well, not that packed, but there were people lying on the bunks. Bloody silence. Only the clatter of wheels could be heard. Until you forget the wind outside the window. Well, I think they loaded up, maybe with passengers at the stations. I climb back and hear that the one lying on the next bunk is whispering something. He curled up, turned to the wall and whispered. Well, I don't know if he's sleepwalking. But suddenly he turned to me, and I doubted that it was a man at all. And I doubted, because only his upper part turned to me, and his legs were still lying where they were. And the sheet he was covered with began to blush slowly. He looked like a normal person, but I felt like a fucking dead man. I woke up instantly. The drowsiness flew away like it never existed. I grabbed my bag and walked out into the corridor of the carriage, so to speak. As I ran to the end of the car, I realized that I was in some kind of hell, or there's no other way to put it, because there was no other way to explain what was going on in that damned car. There were people lying on the bunks, but something strange was happening to them. A grandmother lay stupidly turning over very fast, and the feeling was as if she was spinning in the air under the sheet. The man was lying with his mouth open, and open to the extent that a normal living person's mouth would never open like that. I got goosebumps, started to feel dizzy, and so on almost every bunk some thrash was going on, but the worst was ahead. Then I quietly walked to the exit to the vestibule, opened the door, turned back and was dumbfounded. The wagon inside began to change before my eyes. It began to rust. The bunks were falling down with the passengers. The linoleum on the floor was cracking and buckling, but that was nothing compared to what stood at the opposite end of the car. It was something that looked like a person, but was not me. It was clearly visible. It was naked, thin, and incredibly scary. I didn't get a good look at its face, and it was as if it didn't even exist. The neck was turned off to the side, and there was a nose and a small mouth. No eyes at all. I could see that in the flicker of the lamp. But the worst part was his hands. There were 3 or 4 fingers on each of them. About half a meter each. They dangled and reached all the way to the floor. I was terrified. Hoping that it was just a dream, I slapped my hands on my cheeks. But it wasn't a dream. It was fucking reality. Some kind of parallel reality. I couldn't understand a fucking thing. I stood in the vestibule for about half a minute. What the fuck was that asshole doing? In a split second, she ran from the other end of the car, straight to me. That's when I thought I was going to pass out. And it would have been good if I had. Except I didn't. But the next thing happened. The creature looked at the glass of the door, leaned on it with its half-meter fingers, and stared at me. I was shaking, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. It stared at me, scrutinizing me like a piece of meat. I stood there for another 10 seconds, then it started pounding on the glass. And it closed the door so it couldn't get through to me. But when it started trying to kill the glass and kick the door, that's when I remembered about the stopcock. Pulling it, I immediately heard the squeal of wheels and felt my speed begin to drop. Without thinking long, I opened the car and jumped out of it into the street. Thankfully, I'm good with physics, and jumping out of the car, I immediately ran forward. Well, not to fall. I hit my legs hard though, but thank God I didn't break anything. I ran like that for a while and the train stopped. I ran off into the woods. Believe me, I wasn't thinking about the apartment or the bag left in the car. I just wanted to get away from that fucking train. I ran about 300 meters and noticed lights in the distance. Apparently there was some kind of village or farm. I don't know. Little lights were shining in the distance. Between me and these lights, as it seemed to me, there was only a short distance. But in fact, it was kilometers of steppe to small forests. I ran for a long time, but after maybe 20 minutes I was exhausted and collapsed on the ground. I dozed off there. I woke up in the morning to find a grandfather with an old rifle on his shoulder and old clothes. "Hey kid, why are you lying here? Get up. You can't sleep here." I felt like I'd been hit over the head. I got up on my feet. "Who are you?" I shouted. "Everyone calls me Grandpa Clem." "And where did you come from so handsome?" Laughing, he asked me. I ran from the train. "What the hell is this? You can't sleep. What is this place?" Panic was on its way to my brain. Grandpa's face changed. "Did you see them?" Who? "Demons." I just nodded silently. "Come with me. Just keep up, or you might get hurt." I followed my grandfather. "This place isn't good," the grandfather muttered. "What are you doing here? I live here, and I'm not the only one." "So what is this place?" "There's been a devilish thing going on here lately. I don't know where it came from or why, but there's something here. You can't sleep in these parts. Not at home, not on the train, not in the street. They attack people who are asleep, only because they're weak. The body is weak, the mind is weak. But when does a man sleep? We had two in our village 3 days ago. One was Stjepka, the piano player. His fingers were so long, you should have seen them. And I'm walking along thinking to myself, yeah, I think I saw him too. He often liked to go to the railroad tracks to watch the trains. I know I saw him. That's terrible. What the hell is going on here?" "Grandpa Clem." "Oh, so how can you stay awake? You can only sleep early in the morning, and not much. You have to drink a lot of coffee. And don't relax. Here we are. Let's go inside. You hungry? I'd love some. Come on, let's go. Grandpa Clem, I must have seen your piano player tonight. I told you, they took him away the other day. He got drunk and fell asleep last night." I'm shocked. He talks about it so calmly, as if some demonic thing happens to him every day. We came to an old house. "Here, come in, you'll be a guest." He went to the stove and took out a nice piece of baked lard. He cut me a piece of bread and put on a full glass of cloudy moonshine. "Drink, eat, and you can go to sleep. I'll wake you up in an hour or two and tell you everything. And there's a lot to tell. Take my word for it." After drinking moonshine and eating a piece of lard, I laid down on an old spring bed and passed out. At this time you can sleep, as Grandpa Clem told me.